Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome. I welcome you all to this lecture in the course Sandhi in Paninian Grammar. We continue to study Ach Sandhi, that is vowel Sandhi. We said that Ach Sandhi can be classified under two heads: Ekasthanika Ekadesha, one sthani and one substitute. Ekah sthani, ekah adeshaha. One substituend, one substitute. One substitute coming in place of one substituent. One substitute replacing one substituent. That is the first type of Ach Sandhi. And the second type of Ach Sandhi is Dvisthanika Ekadesha, where we have one substitute replacing two substituents. One substitute in place of two substituents. We shall study this second type of Ach Sandhi little later. Right now, we have concentrated on our study of this Ekasthanika Ekadesha. We have already studied the first instance of Ekasthanika Ekadesha, namely Iko-Yanachi Sutra, which prescribes the Sandhi called Yan Sandhi. We studied this Sandhi in detail. We looked at the Sutra and its meaning. We also looked at the Uddeshya Videya Bhava by the application of Anudit Savarnasya Chapratyayaha. Then we looked at the criterion for selection of the substitute. Then we looked at individual examples. We also looked at the discussion points, including the interrelation of Yan Sandhi and the accent rules. And finally, we also studied the Sthanivat Bhava that is discussed in the Paninian grammatical tradition while discussing the Ach Sandhi. We also observed that there is one small gap in the treatment of Yan Sandhi, which was observed by none other than the earliest commentators on Panini, and a solution was suggested, and then the desired forms were generated and justified. Now it is time to move ahead and look at the second instance and study in detail this second instance of Ekasthanika Ekadesha. And so, this Ekasthanika Ekadesha is Ayavayava Sandhi. To put the Ekasthanika Ekadesha in the diagrammatical form, we have been studying this diagram for some time now, which says that you have A plus B, both of them in Samhita mode in extreme proximity, and in this situation A is substituted by C. A is the sthani, B is the right hand environment, and in this environment A is substituted by C. The input is A plus B and the output is C plus B. This is the substitute this is the substituent. One substitute in place of one substituent. This is what is Ekasthanika Ekadesha. This Ekasthanika Ekadesha is stated in the Ashtadhyayi in the section 6172 onwards up to 6183. And as we said earlier, we have studied in detail the first instance of this Ekasthanika Ekadesha, namely Yan Sandhi, stated by the Sutra Iko Yanachi. Now we plan to study the second instance of this Ekasthanika Ekadesha, namely the Ayavayav Sandhi. Ayavayav Sandhi. This Ayavayav Sandhi is stated by the Sutra Echo Yavayavaha 6178, and I have already broken the sutra for you into two components. The first one is Echo and the second one is Ayavayavaha. The Sandhi of these two can be done, and the sutra is in fact read in the text of the Ashtadhyayi as Echo Yavayavaha. And this Sandhi and this sutra we shall study later on when we study the Dvisthanika Ekadesha, namely Engah Padantadati, this sutra. Let us come back to Echo Yavayavaha. There are two padas, Echo and Ayavayavaha. Echo is Echaha 6-1 of H. What it means is in place of H. And Ayavayavaha is 1/3 of Ayavayav. H is a pratyahara formed by the Sutra 4 and 5. It begins with A and ends in ouch, so ch. So H pratyahara covers Sutra 4 and 5, and these sounds A, O, these are stated in Sutra number 4, and I and O stated in Sutra number 5. Ayavayava consists of 4 elements: Aya, Av, Aya and Ava. We also have studied a methodology to study the interpretation of the Panini Sutras, how the meaning of the sutra is made. So there are some words that are continued from the previous sutra. In this case, Achi is continued. Achi is 7-1 of Ach, Ach meaning vowel, covering the first 5 sutras in the Pratyahara Sutra. Ach stands for a vowel. Achi stands for immediately before a vowel. This word Achi is continued from the Sutra Iko Yanachi 6177. The other word that continues in this particular sutra is Samhitayam, which is 7-1 of Samhita. And so Samhitayam means when in the Samhita mode, when in extreme proximity or close proximity, which means that when two sounds are uttered in extreme proximity. The right hand sound is Ach, and the sound that appears immediately before this Ach is nothing but H. And then this sutra applies and generates the output in the form of Ay, Av, Ay and Av. So the meaning of this sutra in a nutshell is this: when in extreme proximity, immediately before any vowel, that is Ach, H, that is A, O, I and O, H is substituted by Ay, Av, Ay and Av. This is the meaning of this particular sutra. To put it in the form of an equation, we can say that if we have H plus H, plus sign indicates that these two sounds are uttered in close proximity. So H is immediately followed by H. To put it in other words, H comes immediately before H in the Samhita mode, and then H is substituted by Aya, Ava, Aya and Ava. So the input is H plus H and the output is Ayavayava plus H. Input is H plus H and output is Aya, Ava, Aya, Ava plus H. Now we note that in the input we have H. H stands for 4 vowels A, O, I and O, and the output also has 4 substitutes Aya, Ava, Aya and Ava. So there are 4 substituents in the form of H and 4 substitutes in the form of Ayavayava. So we can say that there is this principle of correspondence that comes into play. In Sanskrit it is called Yathasankhya, stated by the sutra Yathasankyam Anudeshah Samanam, which says that the elements described in 2 sets, if they are equal in number, then they are mutually related by correspondence, which means that the first member of the first set is related to the first member of the second set, and so on and so forth. In this case, H is a set consisting of 4 vowels, being the substituents sthani, and there are 4 elements which are stated as the substitutes, which are stated as adesha. So first element amongst the substituents is related with the first element amongst the substitutes. A with Aya, O with Ava, I with Aya and Au with Ava. This is what this principle of correspondence or Yathasankhya says. So we have H being the substituent sthani, 4 in number, and Ayavayava the substitute or adesha, 4 in number. And so we have A plus H as the input in the Samhita mode, and 6178 would apply, and A would be substituted by Aya and the output would be Aya plus H. Similarly, O plus H being uttered in close proximity, Samhita, and so 6178 applies and O is substituted by Ava and the output is Ava plus H. I plus H is the input and then they are uttered in close proximity, and then 6178 applies and I is substituted by Aya and the output is I plus H. Similarly, Au plus H, and they are uttered in close proximity, and so 6178 applies and Au is substituted by Ava and the output is Av plus H. This is how Yathasankhya would allow us to interpret this sutra. Now we introduce the concepts of Uddeshya and Videya in this sutra through the application of the sutra 1169, namely Anudit Savarnasya Cha Pratyayaha. In this case, we have Uddeshya in the form of H as well as H. We already know what H is and what H is. H is 4 vowels, Ach is all vowels. And we know that the Videya is Ayavayava. This is stated only by this particular Sutra 6178. Now by the application of 1169, we would say that the Uddeshya, namely H and Ach, they represent their homogeneous sounds. Let us look at Anudit Savarnasya Cha Pratyayaha once again in some detail. Anudit Savarnasya Cha Pratyayaha is 1169. What it means is Avidhiyamanaha An Udit Cha Savarnasya Saudnya Syat. An and Udit, which are not Vidheya, stand for their homogeneous sounds. This is the meaning of this particular sutra. What it means is that An and Udit, which are Uddeshya, they stand for their homogeneous sounds. So, An, which is stated in 1169, is a pratyahara that covers the first 6 sutras: Ayun, Ruluk, Eom, Ayauch, Hayavarat and Lan. Sutras 1 to 6. And we already have noted that only in this particular sutra the pratyahara uncovers the 6 sutras. Everywhere else the pratyahara uncovers only the first sutra. What is Udit? Udit is an element which has an ut, namely u, as it, as a marker. So ku is Udit, chu is Udit, etc. Ku is Udit because ku consists of k consonant plus u, which is a marker, ut. U stands for short u, which is also mentioned as ut. So ku is a Udit, chu is an Udit, and so on. Now these sounds stated in the 14 sutras stand for their homogeneous sounds or Savarna sounds. This is what is the meaning of 1169. Applying this sutra in 6178, we note that H, which is an Uddeshya, is part of An, and so it represents the respective Savarna sounds, the respective homogeneous sounds. Ayavayava is a Videya and does not represent the respective Savarna or homogeneous sounds. Once again, we have Ach being the right hand side environment, and this is an Uddeshya. Ach is part of An, and so it represents the respective Savarna homogeneous sounds. So if we revisit 6178 after applying 1169 Anudit Savarnasya Cha Pratyayaha, we can rewrite the rule Echoyavayavaha in this particular fashion. H, A, O, I, Au, they don't have a short variety. So they have 6 Dirgha and 6 Pluta varieties. So 4 into 12, 48 sounds. And we have also seen that the Pluta sounds do not undergo the sandhi operations. So we omit the 24 varieties of Pluta of these sounds. So we have 24 remaining varieties of H. Similarly, we have also seen that Ach stands for 132 sounds. A, I, U and Ru, these 4 sounds, they have Rasva, Dirgha and Puluta into Udatta, Anudatta and Svarita into Anunasika and Ananunasika, that is 18 varieties each, 18 into 4, 72. Then we have lu, which does not have a long variety. So we have 12 varieties of lu. And then a, o, I, o do not have the short varieties. So they have only dirgha and pluta varieties of sounds, which is 48 sounds. So 60 plus 72, that makes it 132. Now we remove 6 pluta varieties of each, that means 54 sounds, which means that 132 minus 54, that is 78 sounds, they act as the right hand side environment. So we can now rewrite the equation related to 6178, where we say that H, 24 in number, plus H, 78 in number, and those many combinations. H plus H uttered in extreme proximity, and the output generated is Ayavayav plus H after the application of 6178. The output is only this, Aya, Ava, Aya and Ava being the substitute, plus the right hand side environment H, 78 varieties. This is how we can rewrite Echo Yavayavaha. Now the question is, if you have 24 varieties of substituents and 4 substitutes, obviously you cannot apply the principle of correspondence Yatha Sankhya Nyaya over here. So then what is the criterion for selection of the substitute? The criterion for selection of substitute, namely antaratamya or proximity, is the place of articulation, ucharana sthana, within the oral cavity. So now if we study the ucharana sthanas of the respective substituents and the substitutes, we come across these following matching pairs. A, the place of articulation of A is Kanthatalu as described in Paninian Shiksha, and the phonetic description of the place of articulation of Aya is also Kanthatalu. O is described as Kanthoshtha, O as a substituent, and amongst the 4, Ava is also described to have Kanthoshtha as its place of articulation. I is described to have the place of articulation in the form of Kanthatalu, and I also is described to have the place of articulation in the form of Kanthatalu. And finally, Au has got Kanthoshtha as its place of articulation, and Av also has got Kanthoshtha as the place of articulation. So A, O, I, Au, the 24 varieties of these vowels have got similarities, have got matches with the place of articulation in the form of Aya, Ava, Aya and Ava. Based on this, now the substitute is selected. 6 varieties of A, and they have Aya as the substitute. 6 varieties of O, and the substitute is Ava. 6 varieties of I, and the substitute is Aya. 6 varieties of Au, and the substitute is Ava. Now at this point we need to study the interrelation between 2 sutras, Iko Yanachi and Echo Yavayavaha. Iko Yanachi is 6177 and Echo Yavayavaha is 6178. We need to also understand the structure of A, O, I and Au. A, O, I and Au, they are considered to be Dirghaswaras and also Sanyukta Swaras. They are made up of 2 vowels. A is made up of A followed by E, O is made up of A followed by U, I is made up of A followed by E, and au is made up of a followed by u. If we now replace a, o, I, o with this information and rewrite the rule, we will get the following situation. So now we have a plus h, which eventually is a plus e plus h in Samhita mode. O plus h eventually means a plus u plus h. I plus h is equal to a plus e plus h. O plus h is equal to a plus u plus h. What is happening over here is that even though we are applying 6178, actually it is only 6177, namely eco energy, which is actually taking place. So we have E plus H, U plus H, E plus H and U plus H. This is what is happening. And we are substituting E by Y and U by V in all these four cases. Whereas this first member of the conjunct vowel remains intact. So we have A plus H and 6178 applies and the output is I plus H. So this remains as it is, E gets substituted by Y and so we have I plus H as the output. When we have O followed by H in close proximity in the Samhita mode, it is U is followed by H. And so this U is getting replaced by the substitute V and so we are getting the output in the form of AV plus H. Similarly, we have I plus H, which means A plus E. Once again E is getting substituted by Y and so we have the output I plus H. And finally AU, which is made up of A plus U and so U is getting substituted by V and the output is AV plus H. This is how the interrelation between 6177 eco energy and HOYAVAYAVAHA can be explained. To summarize, we studied how 6178 is interpreted in the tradition of the Paninian grammar. This included the application of 1169 and the interpretation and the interrelation of 6177 and 6178. It is clear that in 6178 we are applying 6177 internally. Now we study the individual examples. We study this in the next lecture. Thank you for your attention.